Hello, I'm Craig Thielen, and this is the 1% Better podcast. Today I'm speaking with Carissa Rollins, Chief Information Officer at Illumina. Carissa has also served as CIO at United Healthcare and Gander Mountain, among other things. Welcome to the Christmas edition here, Carissa, of the 1% Better.
Thanks for having me.
Yes, so where are you calling from today? Are you in Minnesota, or are you somewhere?
I am.
Okay, perfect. So
I'm in snowy Minnesota, getting some snow for Christmas.
it is a winter wonderland.
Yes.
So we do have an international audience, and so Minnesota is in the middle of winter, and we've got a fresh 3 to 4 inches here, so it's on time for the holidays. Well, Carissa, maybe we just get started and talk a little bit about your background. You're obviously in the CIO role today, but was that always your goal, or was it something that evolved, and how did you get there?
Yeah, no, definitely wasn't something I thought about early in my career for sure. Well, first of all, I was going to go to school to be an attorney, but I had touched a computer when I was in high school. My dad had bought one for us at home, and I'm going to date myself. It did not have a hard drive. It only had 2 floppy drives, so you had to run the
I'm
OS.
with you.
So, yeah. And I really liked it. And when I was in college, I took elective classes and computer classes. And so one of my professors, a woman, said, Carissa, you should really, go into computers. And so I graduated from Marquette with a management information systems degree, which back then was kind of a big deal. And my first job out of school was as a COBOL programmer at Baxter Healthcare. Yes. And
I've programmed in COBOL. It's a great language.
So I will tell you that I did not really enjoy it all that much. Within the first year, I taught myself Visual Basic. I just bought a book and started learning. And I went to another group, to the leader of another group, and I said, can I join your group? I really don't want to be a COBOL programmer. And so I ended up in this, client server development group.
Oh, yeah, that was leading edge back
Leading
in the day.
edge, yes. And at the same time I was doing that, I went back to school to get my MBA. And oftentimes, in those days, you needed to go find out what the users wanted. We didn't have like formal, business requirements documents and things like that. People wrote down, what they wanted. And none of my peers wanted to go talk to the business. And so they sent me. And so my career kind of started as being this liaison between development and technology and the business. And it just took off from there. I had my own consulting firm for almost 9 years, and I did really big project implementations at Abbott Labs and Johnson Controls and Miller Brewing Company and, all these great places. And I kind of skipped middle management. I was at Miller Brewing Company for like the 3rd time doing a big project. And the CIO there said, Carissa, why don't you just come on board, as a director? And I had to think about it for a while because I'd been on my own for a long time. But I was pregnant with my 2nd son and didn't want to travel much anymore. And so I did. So I kind of skipped like all of the manager, senior manager, like all of those layers, which was a good and bad thing, I think, but I learned quickly. And so that was kind of the start of my corporate career. And I moved from Miller to Manpower, all great Milwaukee companies, to Kohl's, also another great Milwaukee company, and made it to the VP level there, and then applied for a job here in the Twin Cities as a CIO 10 years ago. So it's been 10 years as a CIO. I'm on my 3rd gig as a CIO. The first company I was the CIO at went bankrupt. So
not anything to do with you. So
no
track record there. And that's where we met 10 years ago. And gosh, it seems like a lifetime ago. Like what's changed, just with you and your career, and then just what's changed in the world, and how we always say, technology is always increasing the speed of change. But wow, I mean, just think even 10 years ago, how much has changed.
I know it's actually very crazy. And sometimes you try to stay up to date, right? I'm an avid reader and I'm always listening to my team about new technology, and it's definitely something that in this role, you always have to try to stay on top of things. You don't need to know the nuts and bolts of everything, but you need to understand how the new technology is going to fit into your business's strategy and how it can enable the strategy, which is something I've been very good at over the years, which is why I think I've been successful in the CIO role. So yeah, it's been a good
Well,
run.
that's yeah, it's kind of fun. Just I didn't realize. I always learn about people, even though I've known you for 10 years. I didn't know that you were, aspired to be an attorney at one point. So that's something
Yes.
new.
Yes.
Well, one thing that you said, I want to just kind of rewind a bit. When when you first got started, you had an advisor that said you should go into technology. It was called computer systems and information management. I also got an MIS degree back in the day, but you were in the minority, like extreme minority back then. So how have you seen, women in technology? I mean, you must have been like less than 5% back
Yeah.
then. And just what was that like being, extreme minority? And then how has that changed over the years?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question that I didn't reflect on much until probably the last 10 years when I became a CIO. I didn't think about it a lot, to be honest with you. My dad was amazing. My parents were amazing. And he never said to me, you can't do something because you're a girl. He pushed me hard to be whatever I wanted to be. Right. And so I didn't really think a lot about it. And the other thing was the one thing I do reflect on back when I started in IT is sometimes the women who had made it to the top closed the door behind them. And I
Mm,
learned a lot from that. I learned not to close the door. And so when I had gotten to a point where I could help open doors for minorities, not just women, right? For people that were overlooked, I I took that to heart and I said, you know what, if I don't do this, who's going to do it, right? We have to work on this together. So the sad part about it is I actually attended a meeting a few weeks ago. McKinsey does a study every year on women in technology and women in the workforce. And we kind of peaked out about 8, 9 years ago, and now
okay.
it's declining again.
Did not know that.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. And so maybe in the next phase of my career, I'm going to do something about that. I have to figure
Okay.
out what to do about
Okay.
that, right? But yeah, I do feel like I don't want to close the door behind me, and I want to make sure that everybody has the opportunity to be as successful as I have been, and I've had help, right? You asked me, did I want to be a CIO? And back at Baxter, that group that I went to as a client server developer, my boss, Neil Liebert, said, you're going to be a CIO someday, Carissa. And I'm like, wow, nah, that's never going to happen. So I always remember that, but I never really had a path, right? I just did it, I guess.
Yeah.
That's probably not a good answer, but it's
No,
the
I mean,
truth.
it's, as I talk to people, and you've had really a lot of success in taking on bigger and bigger roles. I mean, probably beyond your, wildest dreams to, I mean, be a
Yes.
CIO at one of the largest companies in the US and in the world, I mean, is, a huge accomplishment. But I always ask people, or I'm starting to ask more and more, like, it's usually the chicken and egg question. Was it always your goal to be whatever it is, whether, great, athlete in a sport or playing the NBA or a certain role in a corporation, or did it something that just evolved and you sort of love the work so much that you rose to the top? I think you're probably the latter. And it's just interesting, right? Some people
Yeah.
know exactly they want to be a doctor, a neurosurgeon, or whatever, and some people
Right.
just find their passion. And I think to some degree you found your passion. We'll get more into some of that in a little bit, but I want to ask you another question. This is maybe a hard question to answer, but just, with all great triumphs, there's always significant challenges. And many times the challenges are what define the triumph and
Yes.
help you get there. So I'm just curious, as you look back over the years, like what were some of the biggest challenges that you faced personally and how did it inform you? I mean, you mentioned one of them, just don't close the door behind you, and that's left an impression. But what are some of those challenges? Because I think a lot of people, it's easy to talk about all the successes and promotions and
Mhm.
accolades, but like what were those challenges and how did it shape your approach to leading as you got into bigger roles?
Yeah, I think I'll speak to one that I had at a company in Milwaukee that I didn't stay at very long. And for me, what's challenging for me is not the work and it's not the people, it's the culture. And I struggle in cultures that are not inclusive and transparent, and there's a lot of hidden agendas. And at this particular company, the CEO had promised the board that he would have this project delivered on January 1st of this year that I started at the company. And I told him it was not going to happen. And the woman who was the sponsor of the program was the chief marketing officer, and she was actually my boss. It's the first time in my career that I had not reported into IT. And she was very abrasive and not a good leader, and did not support my team, did not support the work we were trying to do, just continued to pound on the fact that we needed to get this thing done on January 1st. And literally every week I told her it was not going to happen. And what I learned from her is that I have a voice and I can be strong, and I don't have to worry about the consequences of that, right? I've always felt like truth is the best serum for anybody, and to not hide things. And so it was very difficult to work for her, and I learned a lot, and I actually quit twice on her. And she would beg me to come back, but I did eventually leave that company because the culture was just too toxic. So that's one lesson I learned, how not to be a bad boss.
Yeah,
the other lesson
absolutely.
I learned actually at that same company was telling stories is an important part of your job. If you can't tell a story and tell the why of what you're doing, you're not going to be successful. Nobody cares about the technology. They care about what you're going to deliver for them that's going to help them advance the company. So you have to be able to tell that story. So I learned that at that company. The second life lesson that I actually talk to my teams about a lot is at Kohl's. We were turning from a brick and mortar retailer to an online retailer, right?
Yep.
And we had to rip out a bunch of stuff, MDMs, like redo the website. And I was in charge of the customer MDM and the product MDM. And we implemented the product MDM right after Black Friday.
Wow.
Yeah, just to get it going. And I had made one of the layers of technology because we didn't have time to do a POC. We always thought we would, and we didn't. And so I made a decision about one of the layers of technology with my chief architect. I'm like, well, he's like, what are we going to do? I'm like, okay, we're going to go with this technology. We had to make a decision. And that technology was not working well in our environment of a lot of data and was losing data in production. And my boss at the time came in my office with his forehead vein popping out, very angry, and asked me in very colorful language who made the decision to go with this technology. And I said, I did. And he just calmed down after that. And he said, thank you for admitting to that. That's really big of you. Go fix it, with a bunch of F-bombs in the middle of that.
Yes.
And that was a very great lesson for me because he had my back when I made a decision that didn't turn out well. And so I tell my team, I'm like, you have to be okay with making tough decisions. And when it doesn't go well, you have to admit to that, and then let's move on. Let's figure out what we're going to do to fix it. So I tell that story a lot to people that are admiring problems or scared to make a decision, and it seems to help them along. So.
That's a great story. And just to tell it from your perspective, and like you said, using a story to tell it, sometimes it takes courage to make decisions versus everyone taking the safe route, or having, like you said, admiring the problem, or analysis paralysis, groupthink. All of those things just are not helpful. Sometimes it just have the courage and know that you have people that will support you. So that's a great story. So one thing to tie back, a couple of things that you said. One of the things, that is super common in your role is seems like always driving some level of transformation is kind of the buzzword. Everything is about transformation, whether it be around ways of working, or whether it be around, hey, we've got to be more innovative, or we've got to be lean, or we've got to transform to some new platform, or what have you. And there's so much talk about transformation. The reality is that most transformations fail. Okay, and it's very difficult. And you've already sort of alluded to a couple reasons why. One is, it's really about driving behavior change, which is cultural. And it's, sometimes it's around how people decisions and accountability, and there's a whole bunch of things wrapped up into it. I'm just curious because you've been through it, and I've been fortunate to be part of it a few times with you. How do you look at those kind of big, complex initiatives and not just talking about it, but how do you actually get through it? And you mentioned culture. Culture is a hard thing to change. It's
Mhm.
not just, hey, here's our new culture, put it on the wall, everyone change. It's like takes years, and you have to sort of emulate it, and you have to talk differently and behave differently. So how do you get transformation done really in a complex environment?
Well, it definitely can't be top down. I mean, definitely it has to have executive support and be driven, but it has to start from your people. And you have to have the right skills and people, right, on the bus. And sometimes always when a transformation happens, people make choices about whether or not they want to transform, right? Sometimes maybe a company that used to be a startup and is moving into a much more mature phase. Sometimes people don't like to go to that mature phase, right? They like that
Yep.
entrepreneurial, move fast. I don't have a lot of processes part of their job. And when you're in a transformation where you have to mature, sometimes you have to ask people to find something else because it's not going to work out with their skill set, which is okay, right? That's okay. But you have to start with knowing your people, knowing what drives them to come to work every day, and to speak to them about why the transformation is needed and get them to agree. And if they agree that the transformation is needed, then you have to ask for their help to transform. You can't do it from the top. It has to be a groundswell of the right people on the right seats, on the right bus.
Yeah. It's a lot harder than it seems like on paper. I think the thing you said sort of at the beginning, or at least I kind of you alluded to, which is it's okay if some people don't want to change, and just
Right.
acknowledging and maybe providing a path for those
Right.
people, whether it be leave the organization or stay in a role or change roles or what have you, because you can't, I mean, you can try to make people do stuff, but at the end of the day, they will choose.
Mhm.
And almost the worst situation is people that just pretend and say, well, I'll just get by and I'll just pretend I'm not really going to change, but this too will pass type of thing. But one saying that I heard a long, long time ago, and it really resonates, which is all change is loss and all loss needs to be mourned. And so just to say, hey, we are where we are. Here's where we want to go. If you want to come with us, great. If you don't, it's okay too. We'll
Right.
figure it out. But just acknowledging that is actually a big decision, a big moment for people versus, nope, we're all going to change because we said so. Well,
Right.
that's not going to happen. So why even try, right?
Yeah, exactly. It takes a long time. And I will tell you, and I appreciate Trissential's help in this journey because I'm not necessarily great. I'm a compassionate leader, but I also am impatient, right? So I'm like, okay, we've talked about it. We've talked about it. You've had time to make a decision about whether or not you want to change. We got to move now, right? We got to
Yeah,
move.
right.
And so I surround myself with people that are better at helping people understand the why. I mean, I try to help people understand the why, but I get to a point where I'm like, okay, I'm done now explaining. And I surround myself with people who are really good at that. So as you know, I have a few people on my team that I've brought with me from other
Yeah,
companies. So
yeah.
yeah,
No, you do a great job of that. Inside and outside, just having alternative voices, independent voices, not just yes people, but just, hey, am I
right.
thinking about this right? And everyone's got strengths and weaknesses. So having a diversity of thought is, you do a great job of that. So I mean, we talked about transformation a little bit. I think Illumina, which I think is a fascinating company, and what you guys do is gone through a lot of change and is continuing to go through change and drive change. So maybe for the audience, just who is Illumina? What do you do, and how are things changing at Illumina?
Yeah. So I'll start with our mission, which is to improve human health by unlocking the power of the genome. We are a global company and we're the leader in innovating for the future of precision health. So DNA tells you a lot about yourself. And we developed the sequencing and array-based technologies that enable that research and discovery that can add to personalized health. And when I say we're global, you have to remember, get yourself out of the United States and how our healthcare system works. In other countries, sequencing the whole population and working on population health is an important part of what other countries do. And we are very much a part of that, as well as research and development here in the US and everywhere else too. Obviously, the US is still our biggest market, but we're in, I think, 55 countries now. So the genome really has the potential to solve humanity's biggest challenge, which is cancer, rare genetic diseases, infectious diseases like COVID-19, food insecurity. We do a lot, in the agriculture business, climate change. The genome is like the heart of all of that. And we have a really strong passion in those spaces and in helping our customers achieve their goals in those spaces. Yeah, our customers are universities and academic research centers and pharma companies. Pharma is really interesting because one of the things I learned when I was at United, and I'm going to get the percentages a little off, but like 50% of the time when you're just subscribed or prescribed a drug for some condition you have, it doesn't work for you.
Right.
And so there's this myriad of drugs that they will try until something works for you. And if you had your DNA, your whole genome sequenced,
yeah,
you would know what drug would work for you in most cases, right?
Not or at least cases. A much more informed, right?
Correct.
Position.
Correct.
Yeah.
Same with rare disease. Like when an infant is born and has several chronic conditions or conditions that can't be diagnosed, it usually takes 8 years to figure out the path. That's the
crazy.
Average. But with a whole genome sequence, probably, a month or two. So yeah.
Carissa, I know there was a project, I forget what the name of it was, and I think it maybe 10 or 15 years ago, there's a huge project to say the first company that could sequence your genome for like under a amount, like $5,000 or $2,000, won this big award. And it was kind of the race, because I think the theory was, and I think it was maybe government funded, but the theory was that once you made it economical, we could apply it to the masses, and man, I mean, we could unlock so much power and potential. So talk a little bit about that. And is it accessible today just to your average consumer? Can we use it as a tool? Do we go through our doctor? Just how does that work for the average person?
Yeah. So yes, there was, and Illumina was right in the middle of all.
Yeah, I figured.
All of that. It is accessible, but not necessarily paid for by insurance, right? And and the other issue we have is most of our doctors that we go to, especially in the United States, were classically trained in like the 90s.
Sure.
And so back then, genomic sequencing was not even part of the discussion.
Right.
And so there's a lot of training that needs to happen. There's a lot of insertion into the care path of sequencing that needs to happen when certain conditions are met, and that necessarily hasn't happened fully yet. We do have a group within Illumina that I'm passionate about called Market Access that works with the likes of United Healthcare. It's one of the reasons I'm at Illumina, is I thought I could make a bigger difference at Illumina in making people healthier. And we work closely with United and Aetna and Elevance and others on getting market access for DNA testing. You're right about the reduction in the cost of the actual just sequencing of the genome, but there's a whole path of stuff that has to occur before and after that assay is slid into the machine. And now what's happened is it's gotten a lot cheaper to actually sequence the genome in the box, but everything up front, the library prep and getting it all ready and the collection of the sample, and then after it's done, understanding the data that comes off that genome, that's expensive too. And so now the transition, because you're talking about transformation, that Illumina is making is we're going to look at that whole workflow. And we're going to work much more closely with our customers on what do they need in that whole workflow. And it's different, right? An academic research center probably doesn't need us in certain areas of the workflow, but a hospital does, right? They need us to kind of handle everything throughout the workflow. And so that's the transformation we're going through right now, is how do we not just look at and create the best box, but how do we create the best workflow and reduce the cost of that workflow?
Yeah, makes sense. More of a solution approach versus a product off the shelf approach.
Correct.
So as a consumer, I mean, I can't just go and get my genome sequence and pay $2,000. It's not that simple.
Well, you could ask your doctor about it. He may say, yay, yeah, let's do that. He may, or she may not say, hey,
or if I want,
but
if I want to pay even out of pocket, I guess.
Right. Correct.
Yeah.
Unless you have, in some cases, we are working with, like I said, the likes of United and other payers where they will pay for it if you have a marker for some type of disease that they need to analyze further. Now, other countries, in England, for example, they're doing much more where many newborns are getting screened. I think in London, when a newborn is born, there's screening, they're doing a whole genome sequence, which will go with them their entire life and help inform their care.
Yeah, that's interesting. So one kind of subtopic, and I don't know how much this ties into what you guys are doing, but I know it's just exploding in the world, and that's epigenetics. So, we've been told, for decades that, there's so many sort of diseases that are hereditary, okay, which means it's sort of in your DNA and it's been passed down and it's hereditary, whether it be your body shape and size, or whether it be your predisposition to certain diseases, what have you. And I still, hear a lot of people talk about, oh, it just runs in my family type of thing. But now with epigenetics, it's a kind of a new exploding field, which is, yes, there's markers in your DNA, but epigenetics controls whether that marker turns into reality or not. And that may be what you eat, it may be your stress levels, it may be toxin, all sorts of things can control if it triggers to, yes, you got cancer or you didn't get cancer, regardless of what your DNA says. So that's pretty exciting stuff that says, hey, actually, I can control my body. And I've even heard, some research that says, your body sort of regenerates every, 60 to 90 days at a cellular level, which means that your body's constantly making decisions on what is the new form going to be, whether it's the extra 5 pounds or the less 5 pounds or whatever those changes are. So I'm just curious, like, how is that impacting you guys? And is that helping kind of the work that you do make it even more valuable? And then what other sort of trends are you guys seeing that's really where your industry is going? I'm just curious, like, what are the sort of the macro trends you guys are seeing?
Yeah, I think one of the things we're really trying to do is get deeper into the DNA and understand it, the genome, and understand it better. Because, we've gotten at a surface level now, and it's not us, it's our customers, right? But we have to provide the tools to help our customers get deeper into that genome and understand things better. Now, it's not just about your genome, right? I actually watched this great masterclass on Delta last night on the way home from San Diego. And I do a lot of reading on like our food industry and how it's changed and how it's impacting our health, mental health, how the tie of your gut health to your brain health,
for sure.
All of that. And it's so true that, the way that we've evolved and then also our DNA impacts our whole body. And I think you can't just look at one thing, like your whole genome sequence, right? Or your DNA. You have to look holistically at your whole body, how you eat, where you live, right? Your social determinants, all of those things are impacting you. And in the United States, we're the sickest country in the world, mostly because we don't pay attention to what we put in our mouth, and then we don't connect that to our health and our brain, and we sit in our chair all day on Zoom calls. And so there's a lot that we have to do to tie all those things together. You asked a question about what else are we working on. Definitely cancer is a focus for us, and we released some new products this last year on really understanding cancer better and how to treat cancer better. So that's something we're also working on, but we're always innovating, right, for the future and thinking about how we can get deeper into the science.
I know you guys have leveraged AI and machine learning for a long, long time, and it's a big part of what you do. Has the recent Gen AI and large language models, has that had an impact at all to your business model?
Absolutely. So I own the enterprise AI strategy. So that's data within our four walls and customer data and things like that. My counterpart, the CTO, who owns the development of our boxes and all of our products, he owns the group that does the AI on the sequencing results. And so they've done a lot of research. And yes, in fact, I just had to buy some hardware last week because we're running out of space for all their data that they're working on. But yes, they are again, none of our competitors are doing this. And so having this capability to analyze the data coming off of the sequencer and then having insights into what to do next is basically very new for companies that have bought the Illumina product. Research agencies or universities that are doing research, they've had their own data scientists. So they've been in the past taking that data and running their own AI and language models, but now we're trying to get something that customers can buy, which we already have, and helping them understand how it can help them.
Yeah, it's really it's got to be exciting to be in the space that you're in. I mean, I've had the opportunity to participate in healthcare in the insurance side, United Healthcare, the provider side, Mayo Clinic, which obviously is a leader, and with Illumina, the work that you're doing can kind of help just illuminate, not to make a pun on the company name, but really illuminate like what are we dealing with here, and just get much deeper in insights. And the thing that's fascinating to me is like there is a major shift going on, and there needs to be. Like we don't have a healthcare system today. We have a sick care system, right? And it's like, how do we shift from solving complex diseases, which many disease states are just going up like radically? How do we shift from just putting band-aids on and giving a drug and doing a procedure to how do we prevent a disease state? And we have the data now. We have, part of it is genome, right? We have your ancestry, we have health records, we have 30,000 clinical trials per disease state. We have so much data, and now we have the compute power, and we have the intelligence given AI and large language models. We have all the tools. Now it's pulling it together, and then it's going into the cultural change, which is how do we get away from how people get paid, and how, including industries and companies and doctors and the whole system, how do we get to the best outcomes? We have all the tools, and it's really exciting because, I mean, you could dream about this maybe 10 or 20 years ago, but you didn't really have all the tools. Now we have all the tools.
Exactly. We have to get the sand out of the gears of the healthcare ecosystem, right? There's a lot of people involved in the ecosystem in the United States specifically.
Yes.
And we have to get the sand out of the gears of the ecosystem. It's one of the things that, I mean, I try to talk about when I'm out at some of these talks that I give, and how do we get the sand out of the gears? I try to go to conferences and understand where those barriers are, which is again another reason I'm at Illumina, is how can I, with my inside knowledge about how a payer system works, help Illumina figure out how to get some of the tests paid for and get this as part of the care path. And it's going to take a change. A change has to occur in the industry for this to happen. And it's not just the industry, though. We as individuals need to pay more attention to ourselves and, what we're putting in our mouth, and what we're, how long we're sitting on the couch, and all of those things. We have to care and understand the connection between all of that and diseases, right?
Yeah.
And the way our healthcare system works today, we don't have the ability as an individual to make decisions, right? Because we don't have the data that we need to make those decisions. We're not qualified to make the decisions, but we need to be able to understand in layman's terms what things mean when you get a test back, right? And what we can do without having to take a drug, right, to impact that.
Yeah, food is a medicine, and medicine is a food is an old saying. So just getting data as a consumer. I think it, largely does have to be consumer driven. Just like you said, a change in an organization has to be sort of people driven. There's this really cool company called Function Health, and it's created by a functional doctor, guy by the name of Dr. Mark Hyman, just a brilliant doctor, Cleveland Clinic, traditionally trained, but then sort of switched over to functional medicine. And what it does is, all it does is, for $500, you can get 130 tests. You go to, get your blood test. Well, you could never get that done in traditional medicine because it'd have to be what's the symptom? Okay, we'll give you this test and we'll give you this test. But in basically one sitting, you can get 130 tests, and it educates you. Okay, here's all these tests. Here's what they mean. Here's what you can do to change them. Here's the tolerance level. And I look at what you guys are doing as a whole nother level, from just 130 blood tests to, like, how am I wired? What is in my DNA? And what does it mean? Again, you got to be educated, because now I can and I could possibly change my behaviors, what I eat, what I put on my body, the toxins, the stress levels, everything could possibly maybe switch one of those epigenetics, so that, because I'm predisposed to this, and prevent something. That's pretty powerful. So I'm really excited about the day that I could do a function, health kind of thing
I wrote it
with
down.
Illumina, and say, hey, I'll pay
Yeah.
$2,000 if I can educate myself about my body. So that's just exciting that we have that capability. We could talk about our healthcare system probably for, a 4-hour podcast.
Long time, yes.
But let's go back. I want to talk a little bit about you. So one of your, I think, talents, superpowers, whatever you want to call them, is your ability to connect with people, build relationships, build trust, and then, allows you to work through, because there's lots of hard things that we do day in and day out, and drive change and work through tough things. So maybe talk a little bit about that, Carissa. Is that something that was always natural for you? Have you honed it? How would you, advise people on how to enhance that to be a better person and better professional?
Yeah, I think I've always kind of had this compassion and caring, gene's a bad word, but aspect of my personality, that I always try to put myself, not always, but I mostly try to put myself in the other person's shoes when I'm taking an action or trying to tell a story, right? Why does this person care? What is it going to mean to them? And so I've honed it, I would say, over the last probably 10 years in this role, to understand people's personalities. Like, we do things like, Strengths Finder, right, with my team.
Yeah.
We just actually went through, like, a month ago, we looked at it together, like, oh, we got a lot of people that deliver, but we need some more people that can influence, right? So I really like that data, because it helps us as a team be better, right? And I think the other thing about me is I'm not very hierarchical. And so everybody's got a job to do. And just because my title is a C title doesn't mean my job is any more important or less important than anybody else's job, but I have a job to do. And we have to work together. I can't do it alone, and you can't do it alone. We have to understand each other and be compassionate about what's happening, not only at work, but at home, right? Sometimes people need some space, right?
For sure.
And
Yeah.
they have to feel safe in saying, look, I need to not be here today, right? Okay, great. Let me know when you're ready again. So I think I've just always had that. And I've honed it a little bit more by trying to understand different aspects of people's personality. And I also try to understand, their home life without digging too much, right? Like, what do you do when you're not working? And, what brings you to work every day? What makes you happy when you come to work? So I've waned and been stronger on those depending on the situation. But it is, if you've ever taken the Hogan test, caring is my second strength. So yeah.
Well, I mean, they always say people, follow people that care, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's you got to care first before people trust you. So
Yeah,
good stuff there. I know one of the other things you do is you serve on a lot of different boards. I was surprised at how many that you've been involved with. So why is that important to you, and what have you learned, being part of boards?
Yeah, I mean, so I'm a small town girl, right? And like you said, I had a job that I never dreamed I would be a CIO of a Fortune 5 company, right? It just wasn't something in my path. And so I feel this great sense of responsibility to give back, to help people that need help. And so my board membership started with nonprofits in Milwaukee. And then when I moved here to the Twin Cities, I looked for a nonprofit that met, my desire for social justice and caring about people. And that was the YWCA. So, those are my nonprofits. I'm also on the board of the Grand Canyon. That for me is like a mental break for me. Like it's a forced, have to go to the canyon 4 times a year for a board meeting. Darn.
Well, I mean, that's actually a really healthy thing to do, is to get into nature, and you're in awe of the Grand Canyon. Yes, that's awesome.
And my cell phone doesn't work there, so that's awesome too. Anyway, and then I realized that I had some unique skills that I could help other companies with. And so I went on this path of what's the best way to become a member of a public company board. And I started with just doing advisory boards. And actually I got asked to do a lot of those, and I've been asked to do several, and I kind of pick and choose what I want to do. And then eventually it led to being on a corporate board, which, to be honest with you, was a very difficult journey. It was not easy. And because people that are on corporate boards are either CEOs or CFOs mostly. And I was fortunate that I was looking for a board opportunity right at the time they wanted more technology people on the board. And I will tell you that those of us who have grown up in technology are not trained to be board members. So it's not been an easy road. I've learned a lot in the last 2 years.
What's the biggest learning? Because I think a lot of people think, oh, I would love to be on a board and it's this great position, but they're very difficult. So what was the biggest surprise and biggest challenge, without, sharing the details? Yeah.
So my number one strength in the Hogan is results. And so I'm a problem solver, right? And so as a board member, you don't get to solve the problem. Right. You have to just advise. And that was really hard for me. Like my board chair a couple times was like, Carissa, we're advising. We're not solving the problem. Like, okay, yep, got it. Can't tell the CIO, this is what you should do, and here's how you should do it. Here's who you should call, right? Because that's what I do. And so that was the hardest part, was just sitting back and saying, nope, I'm an advisor. I have to advise. And then the second thing is I pride myself on really understanding financial statements, right? I read company 10Ks and I do all that kind of stuff, but now you're responsible for it. And so I've had to do some digging out of old financial books and studying up on financial statements, because you don't look at that stuff every day, right? Not like a CFO or CEO who knows the number and what it means and what if it goes up or down. Like those are things that I've had to really study again.
Yeah. Go back to the basics on that. Well, time has flown, and so we're at the end of our time already. So the last question on 1% Better is always reflecting back on your entire life, your career. If you were talking to yourself, coming out of high school, what do you wish you knew then, that you know now? Or what would you tell your grandkids just about life lessons and things you've learned along the way?
Yeah, I think I would have told my 21-year-old self in my first job to be more confident and to not be concerned about what other people are thinking about you. Just do your thing, right? Don't try to change yourself into, something that you're not. And, move to the places that you enjoy. You're going to spend a lot of time at work. So make sure you like your job and you like the people you work with and you like the company and you like, what you're doing, because again, you're going to spend a lot of time at work, and it's really hard to do that when you're not happy. That's what I would tell myself.
Great stuff. Well, thank you so much, Chris. It was great catching up, and thanks for being on 1% Better.
Thanks for having me, Craig.